want to tell you about a winter league way back in 1982, 40 years ago, when our general tactics as a team, the Wareham team, for sorting out bait worked quite well. And if ever there was a match that was two matches in one, this was it. The venues, and there were two venues, were Dryad Lake, about 4 miles north of Portsmouth, and HMS Sultan Moat, which was, I think, near Gosport somewhere, much nearer to Portsmouth itself. Dryad, I've already mentioned, was basically a carp venue. The carp weren't very big. 2 years before 1980 we'd fished there and the carp averaged about £1. And now they've grown a bit bigger. Why they've grown bigger, I don't know, whether it was more bait or they were pretty slow growing. By 1982 they were probably averaging £1.5, £1.6, which meant you still caught little tiny ones of sort of 8 or 10 ounces, but also a few bigger ones of £2, £2.5, £3. The Moat, on the other hand, was just plain rock hard. There was the odd carp in there and a few tiny roach and perch and stuff. That was it. Now, our team tactics as far as bait were concerned were that myself and Phil would get all of the bait for the whole team, for the whole 12 anglers. And because of that, we could get deals on bait. We could make sure that no matter how diverse the venues, we could make sure that each angler had the right bait. And then we split the cost 12 ways. It didn't matter whether you were going to a venue where you needed half a pint of pinkies or a gallon of maggots. You all paid the same. Now you might say, well, if I only needed half a pint of pinkies, that's expensive. But if you're on a venue where you don't know what you're going to be up against, on this particular match we got 6 bloodworm packs as well. And what that meant was that to cater for the Moat and Dryad, you would have had to have had the bait for Dryad, which was basically a gallon of bronze maggots, and all the bait, the bloodworm pack, a few pinkies, a few squats, a few big maggots, a few casters maybe, whatever, for the Moat. So instead of paying this averaged price, which would be £5 or £6 or whatever it was, it's way back then, you'd be paying sort of £15. And if you were on the Moat, you'd have a gallon of maggots that you didn't want anymore, which is crazy. So we worked out the bait, and basically we got 6 gallons of maggots for the 6 anglers who would be on Dryad, and a pint of pinkies, so we could split 6 weights, pint of squats, 6 little packs of bloodworm and joker, a few bits and bobs, and that was it. And this worked very well for our team for quite a few years. The only fly in the ointment was that one angler who joined us, maybe not that particular year, insisted on his own bait. He decided or preferred to prepare all his own casters. Everything had to be perfect. Well, I was pretty good at sorting the bait out. I had a bait fridge. I could riddle the maggots off, put fresh maize meal on them. And him going his own way, we were never quite sure whether he really did have the right bait. And it also made it more awkward because we had to divide things up 11 ways, or 12 was easier because you could work in full gallons of bait. And it was just, 3 gallons of maggots would give us 2 pints each, and so on. So it was a bit awkward really, and it would have been better if he'd kept to the team, the way the team worked, but that's how people are. And that was a shame really, and I don't think we would have minded if his results had been outstanding, but they weren't. They were pretty average as the team went, but it wasn't the worst, but it didn't really help us. So on the day, I think there were 11 teams, and that meant 66 anglers on Dryad and 66 on the Moat, and it was down to the potluck of the draw which one you went to, and then you got the correct bait. Now I drew Dryad. Thank my lucky stars, I was going to go and try and catch some fish. The experience of fishing it 2 years previously, I had a second overall and a section win, and I had a fair idea of the tactics. So I had my gallon of maggots, a lot of Horlicks. We had these catering jars, and we then filled conventional big jars, which were sort of pound jars or something like that, with Horlicks, and a big tray to mix it all up in. And off I went to Dryad, and the other people went off to the Moat, and I started fishing. And I'd refined the tactic a bit. I was fishing a very long tail, about 6 or 7 foot, and certainly years later people started to fish the method feeder on there and fish it very differently, or with a lot of ground bait and casters. I think that's what Bob Nudd was doing there a few years later. But at that time it was basically double bronze maggot, a feeder link Drennan feeder with this long tail, and a forged Mustad 39853s. I think it was on an 18 was about right, to a 1.7 pound Bayer hook length, 3 pound Maxima, Mitchell 300 with the spool nut almost undone so the reel would spin like a bait runner, and my trusty Roy Marlowe persuader. High-tech stuff, but it worked. And the tactic was keep casting in and mix up the sticky mag right through the match and get through a gallon of maggots, and keep balling it in. We had whopper droppers, we were putting it out there in I suppose big sort of golf balls of solid maggots. And with this sticky mag, as soon as it hit the water, it started dissolving very quickly, and the carp came in on the splash. And it wasn't long before I was catching carp quite steadily. The match was going well for me. Carp would come in quite steadily. A couple of times during the match, instead of the swing tip going straight out and the spool spinning, picking up the rod very gently and then slowly tightening up the thing, the swing tip just flickered, little flickers. And I knew what they were. They were roach and rudd. And it was no good waiting for that to sail away. They weren't. So you actually struck those, put your finger on the spool, struck it. And I got a couple of these, a roach and a rudd, each ounce or so. They proved to be important. I didn't think so at the time, but they went in the net. With a few minutes to go, I'd got 17 carp. Well, nothing to worry about. That's a good score. I knew I was going to do reasonably well anyway. I had this funny feeling, this gut feeling, that maybe one more carp would be great. Just one more, please, one more. 10 minutes to go, minutes are ticking away, and I got that bite, and I got a carp of about 1.75 pounds, not the smallest of the ones I had that day. Played it in as if my life depended on it and got him. Not long after the match finished, scalesman came round and I weighed my catch, and I think it took 2 weighs because we were probably on 14-pound scales or something like that. And there at the bottom of the keep now, with this roach and this rudd, I put all the carp in there, and I thought I better put those on there, and the second weigh was sort of 10.2, and I put those on there, went round to 10.4 or something like that. They did the adding up, and I got 24 pound 5 ounces. So those 2 roach and I just put it around 2 ounces. We went back to wherever the draw was, and I cannot for the life of me remember where it was, but it was obviously somewhere central. Because Dryad was a controlled Navy base. It was a naval training centre at that time. Had a golf course all around the fishing lake as well. and how important became apparent that last carp and those roach and those rudd. I'd won the match, which was brilliant as far as I was concerned. £24 5 ounces, second £24 4 ounces, third 23.14, and fourth 23.10. So that last carp had promoted me from a potential fourth, and I might have even been lower than that because it was 6 weights over £20 up to first. Now, when we all got back together with our teammates from the Moat, it was almost as if half of us had spent our day on some sort of fishing paradise and the other half had been to fish in hell. The 6 of us on Dryad had caught 78 pounds of fish. The 6 on the Moat had caught a total, not each, average or anything like that, of 8 ounces. It's quite a contrast. Wareham hadn't done that well as a team. We were well down the field, as the results show. Eastleigh had won it quite clearly. They knew what they were doing. We hadn't done that well on Dryad, really. Although I'd won my section and won the match, the others seemed to have struggled. When we looked at the captain's card and all the points were worked out, incredibly, those 6 of our anglers that had caught 8 ounces between them had scored more points than the 6 of us that had caught £78. And we had something like 67 points. And those 6 on the Moat had caught, they'd got the sort of 37 points, and the other lot of us, we'd got the 30 points. So it was a bit of a contrast at the end of the day. A very memorable match as far as I was concerned. And it was interesting seeing people talking after that match that on Sultan, oh, I finally got a bite at 2:30 and it was a ½ ounce roach on bloodworm. And someone who'd been on Dryad all day, I got 5 carp and I lost 4 and blah, 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 blah. I only had a £6 or £7 or whatever. Should have done much better. So it was a weird day almost. Split venues were nothing new on that particular league and other leagues. Sometimes we fished some of the ponds around Romsey. We fished sort of King and Willow and Embley Park and Stoneham, and each one would be slightly different. You'd be slightly different tactics. Kings Lake was sort of small little carp, and Willow was sort of a bit of everything, and Embley was sort of roach and skimmers, but occasionally someone would get a big carp. So quite variable in what you got, but that contrast of all or nothing was very, very odd, and something we didn't ever come across again in all the match fishing I did. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and until next time, it's goodbye for now.